Hello and welcome. Tonight, Vice President Kashim Shettima joins global leaders in New York for the commemorative 80th United Nations General Assembly session, highlighting Nigeria's diplomatic presence. National Assembly reopens the sealed office of Kogi Central. Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, restoring access after closure dispute sparked political controversy. Central Bank of Nigeria cuts benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points to 27% for the first time in 5 years. And US President Donald Trump addresses UN General Assembly, denounces open borders as a failed experiment and accuses UN of enabling mass migration into Western nations.
And on business, Central Bank moves to block fresh inflation threats amid soaring government allocations.
On sports news tonight, Noni Madueke becomes the latest name on Arsenal's injury list with a knee injury.
And from the nation's capital, Nigerians from all walks of life eulogize former Minister of Agriculture, Chief Ogbeh, as the family commences his funeral processes.
Vice President Kashim Shettima has showcased Nigeria's $200 billion energy transition opportunity to investors, emphasizing the need for partnerships to maximize the multifaceted, multi-billion investment opportunities across the country. The Vice President stated this at a roundtable hosted by the Business Council for International Understanding, which took place on the sidelines of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly ongoing in New York in the United States. Our State House correspondent, Lanre Lasisi, who is in New York, has this report.
This special gathering, taking place in the United Nations headquarters, is a ceremony to mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Vice President Kashim Shettima joined other heads of government for a short ceremony to commemorate the event. He was accompanied by some ministers and aides. United Nations Secretary General, giving the opening remarks of the occasion, emphasized the ever-present need for the founding principles of the Union.
To meet these challenges, we must not only defend the United Nations, we must strengthen it. And that is the purpose of Agenda 2030, the Pact for the Future, and the UN80 initiative, to renew the foundations of international cooperation and to ensure that we can deliver for people everywhere.
Afterwards, the Vice President represented President Bola Tinubu at a roundtable organized by the Business Council for International Understanding, which took place on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly.
I want you to continue believing in Nigeria because the trajectory of global growth is facing Africa, and Nigeria will make or mar that transition. Of the 10 unicorns in Africa, about 8 are in Nigeria. Name some of them for me: Andela, Plutaweb, Moneypoint, Jumia, Ogbeh. That's where the action is. Why do you have to go and waste your resources? Come to Nigeria. Our doors are open for business. We are ready for action.
Other events took place on the sidelines too. At one of such meetings, the Minister of Environment spoke on the need for investments to ensure forest landscape restoration.
Policy is going to address 3 main issues. Number 1 is trying to reduce deforestation, and secondly is going to actually assist in the health of rural women particularly. And at the same time, we're going to build business around that, because many people are now being encouraged to go into the production of cooking stock.
A
very busy day for the Nigerian delegation on the first day of what will be a very, very busy week. And it's only going to get busier. For Tuesday, it's going to turn out to be the first day for the General Assembly and to hear world leaders speak. And would be expecting more meetings will also be happening. From New York, Lanre Lasisi, Channels Television News.
President Bola Tinubu has called for a total rephase in the global financial architecture of Africa's mineral resources, saying now is the time for its nations to assert their influence and power in the African products' global supply chains. Representing President Tinubu at the Second Africa Minerals Strategy Group High-Level Roundtable on Critical Minerals Development in Africa, held on the margins of the 80th session of the UN General Assembly, Vice President Kashim Shettima, President Tinubu urged African leaders to end the ignoble cycle of importing finished goods through accelerated government-led mineral exploration. The Vice President also held a bilateral meeting with the Chancellor of the Republic of Austria.
It's the Second Africa Minerals Strategy Group High-Level Roundtable on Critical Minerals Development in Africa, holding on the margins of the United Nations General Assembly, taking place in New York. Vice President Kashim Shettima joined the chairman of the group and Minister of Solid Minerals, Dele Alake, and other guests to consider the age-long issue of ensuring that Africa gets more from her natural resources.
Mineral development in Africa.
The Vice President, representing President Bola Tinubu at the event, raised the call for a renewed resolve of the part of African nations.
First, we must take the bull by the horns in financing our future. Never again shall we wait for capital to trickle in. With sovereign funds, blended vehicles, and innovation tools like the Africa Mineral Token, Africa shall finance Africa. To safeguard this sovereignty, we must guard our cobalt, lithium, graphite, gold, and rare earth, not as fragmented states, but as one continental bloc, wielding collective power in global supply chains. Today, let us speak with one voice, act with one strategy, and commit with one resolve to reimagine Africa not as a warehouse of raw materials, but as a workshop of value creation.
Some partners echo this charge.
The strategic nature of this mineral is so explosive in terms of what the world needs that Africa needs to be careful in terms of how it positions to make the most of these resources for its people.
The Vice President also attended a bilateral meeting with the Chancellor of the Republic of Austria, Christian Stocker, at the UN headquarters in New York. Both countries agreed to forge new ties and explore new ways of deepening their relationships.
The UN General Assembly is an opportunity for world leaders to present their perspectives on global issues, all highlighting the theme Better Together, 80 years and beyond for peace, development and human rights. Our foreign affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, looks into how the United Nations has evolved over the years and what's ahead.
The United Nations, the haven for countries seeking peaceful coexistence, the arbiter of truth and justice for some. The United Nations over the last few years has become the referee in global issues. A diplomatic presence that seeks to make the world a better place amidst wars and conflict, to prevent wars and conflict. This year, the global body marks 80 years, providing an opportune time to reflect on its achievements and challenges.
To renew the foundations of international cooperation and to
under the leadership of current Secretary General Antonio Guterres, the UN made its first global agreement on a common approach to international migration in all its dimensions. Towards the end of the year and the start of 2020, it navigated the world through the COVID-19 emergency by launching a global humanitarian response plan and developed the UN Comprehensive Response to COVID-19 to save lives, protect societies, and recover better. Fast forward to COP26, where the Glasgow Climate Pact is adopted by almost 200 countries after intense weeks of negotiations. It recognized the global climate emergency and resolved to pursue efforts to keep the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. When the war between Russia and Ukraine broke out in February of 2022, the UN mounted a large-scale relief operation to help those uprooted and otherwise affected by the war. And it continues to intervene in the Israel-Hamas war by spotlighting the need for humanitarian assistance for Gaza's population affected by the war. The UN also intervenes in Africa's food security and the security of lives in conflict areas such as Sudan, the Central Sahel, and the Lake Chad Basin. But the organization continues to be plagued by a number of challenges, such as its overarching veto power system that allows for countries in the Security Council to override decisions and resolutions, frustrating peacekeeping efforts and conflict resolution. And while the Security Council allows for 10 non-permanent members on a rotation basis, African countries are seeking a permanent seat to put forth issues important to the continent. The UN's 80th session of the Great Debate, the Secretary General Antonio Guterres says, will be focused on the war in Gaza, in Sudan, and climate issues. The coming days, however, will determine the success of this year's Great Debate and perhaps set the scene for the UN's relevance and existence over the next 80 years. Amarachi Ubani, Channels Television News.
Back home, the National Assembly has today unsealed the office of the lawmaker representing Kogi's Central Senatorial District, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, giving her access to the complex of the federal legislature. This comes just days after the clerk to the National Assembly, Mr. Kamoruddin Ogulano, formally informed Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan in writing that a 6-month suspension remains in effect pending the judgment of the Court of Appeal in the case she instituted against the Senate. Our National Assembly correspondent, Gloria Umezuke, reports.
Senator Natasha Akpoti's office, I, Alabi Adedeke, Deputy Director, Sergeant at Arms, hereby unseal the office.
News of the unsealing of the office of the suspended lawmaker representing Kogi's Central Senatorial District, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, was immediately met with wild jubilation by enthusiastic supporters. The crowd, accompanying the lawmaker, proceed from the FCT High Court, apparently making their way towards the National Assembly complex. They throng the National Assembly arcade. However, tension rose at the entrance as many of his supporters were denied access to the main building. Eventually, a few supporters were allowed entry as the senator made her way into her office. It was by all appearances a moment of triumph for the lawmaker.
My deepest appreciation to the good people of Kogi Central, Kogi State and Nigeria at large. Senator Pabio is not more of a senator than I am. He's not a governor of this place. And he treated me as if I was his servant or I was a domestic staff in his house. It's very unfortunate that at this time, after so many years of democracy, we would have a National Assembly be run by such dictatorship.
She reiterates that she owes no one any apology.
I'm actually worried as to what apology they expect from me. You can't apologize for an injustice. And may I remind the good people of Nigeria that the document that led to my illegal suspension, which is the recommendation which Senator Neda Emaswen read, was actually written by the office of the Senate President. And the signatures that endorsed that recommendation were not willful signatures. It was only attendance sheet that was attached. That means the entire document that read and pronounced my suspension was listed with fraud. So if they are expecting me to apologize, I'm sorry, I don't have these words. And if that is the condition for opening this office, then I think we have a long dance to make.
She had been suspended for 6 months in March 2025 following allegations of misconduct after she was accused of flouting the rules of the Senate. Her resumption is coming on the day the National Assembly postponed the resumption of plenary by 2 weeks. From the National Assembly, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
In part 2 after the break, Central Bank of Nigeria cuts benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points to 27% for the first time in 5 years. Plus, reaction from renowned economist Mr. Bismarck Rouhani to the MPC decision. Please stay with Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Vice President Kashim Shettima joins global leaders in New York for the commemorative 80th UN General Assembly session, highlighting Nigeria's diplomatic presence. National Assembly reopens the sealed office of Kogi Central Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, restoring access after closure which sparked political controversy. Our Central Bank of Nigeria cuts benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points to 27% for the first time in 5 years. And US President Donald Trump addresses UN General Assembly, denounces open borders as a failed experiment, and accuses UN of enabling mass migration into Western nations. Still on Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan and the trial of the suspended federal lawmaker representing Kogi Central for allegedly defaming the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, and former Governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, has been stalled. The trial, scheduled to begin on Tuesday, was adjourned to October the 27th by Justice Chizoba Orji of the Federal Capital Territory High Court, following objections raised by her against the competence of the charges. Her lead counsel, Ehigwe West Idahosa, predicated their objections on the alleged abuse of prosecutorial powers by the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation by filing charges against her at the Federal High Court and FCT High Court on the same subject matter and same complaints. Though the counsel for the prosecution, David Kaswe, was ready to field his first witness, the request was however opposed by the counsel to the defendant on the grounds that his client has filed a motion on notice challenging the competence of the charges and the jurisdiction of the court. After hearing from both parties, Justice Chizoba Orji subsequently fixed October the 27th for Senator Natasha's motion to be heard, along with the response of the Attorney General of the Federation. The Central Bank of Nigeria, the CBN, has delivered its first rate cut since the pandemic, trimming the benchmark interest rate by 50 basis points after the U.S. Federal Reserve's move last week. Our business correspondent, Ladi Williams, has the report.
It's interest rate setting season, and at its September meeting, the Monetary Policy Committee cut its lending rate by 50 basis points, the first rate slash in 5 years.
The committee's decision to lower the monetary policy rate was predicated on the sustained disinflation recorded in the past 5 months, projections of declining inflation for the rest of 2025, and the need to support economic recovery efforts.
The decision follows last week's U.S. Fed rate cut, signaling that global central banks may be easing up after years of aggressive tightening. But that's not all. The CBN also unveiled a bold shift in reserve requirements. Commercial banks get some breathing room with their cash reserve ratio reduced by 45%, unlocking liquidity that could flow into lending and investment. On the flip side, the regulator turned up the heat on government-linked enterprises, hiking the CRR for non-TSA parastatals to a hefty 75% in a bid to mop up excess cash and reining inflationary pressures.
So which means we most likely are going to see a situation where non-TSA businesses or organizations would then, over time, be willing or could be willing to want to move into the TSA arrangement.
I'll be a bit, careful with some of these deposits going forward, right? It will have to be because I have a need and there's something, some benefit I can get out of it, because otherwise, if you have to pay 75% CRR on a deposit, where you then know that if they show up the next day to take their funds, you don't have control over it, then you start to think about it. Then I believe people like NMPC will then start to think about, because if you go to this bank is not willing, this other one is not willing, you start to think about going back, you willingly wanting to join TSA, because that way, there's really nothing for you to lose.
The message is clear. The CBN is loosening the reins to support growth while still keeping a firm grip on financial stability. Markets, investors, and everyday Nigerians will be watching closely to see how this policy mix plays out in the weeks ahead. Laddie Williams, Channels Television News.
And now to give us the facts behind the figures of the CBN's latest decisions on the policy rate, I'm joined by the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, Mr. Bismarck Rawani. Mr. Rawani, glad you could join us on the news at 10.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start by looking at this latest decision. Of course, interest rates are down for the first time in 5 years. Why the cut? And Mr. Rawani, why now?
Well, first and foremost, a cut was coming anyway.
It was coming?
It was coming. We had it coming. So leaving it so that inflation could have been tapered, and you can see here why the cut and why now. The red line is inflation, and the green line is the MPR. You can see that they kept MPR flat, and that has brought inflation down from the point of 34.8 all the way now to 20.12. So that's good news, right? And you have to look at it in the context of fiscal and monetary policy. Now, the monetary policy officials, all right, have maintained their autonomy and independence and stayed the course. While fiscal authorities have been struggling to ensure that the money supply and spending doesn't go out of line. So if you look at what happened in the last 4 years, and that's here you have to look at it properly. In the last 5 years, you'll find that between 2020 and 2024, inflation spiked, right? And 2024 was a red year. Everything was red. So in 2025, so let's put it this way, 2023 was a disaster. That's when we removed the subsidies and all that. 2024, the effect of that started to manifest. And 2025 is the year of recovery. And you're now beginning to see that recovery coming out and playing out in the economy. And the slides will show you what has happened. So, well, one, the cut is now. And two, like you said, now is the time for the economy to begin to reap the benefits of this. And the economy reaping the benefits of these policies takes some time. And therefore, you will see, as we go into under the next slides, this was the decision. Down 50 basis points, brought down the cash reserve ratio to 45. Asymmetric corridor was narrowed, and liquidity ratio will remain flat. So generally speaking, loosening, so that there's no money to spend by the people, right? And the government, the most important thing, the government debt service, once these rates go down, and you talk about almost 200 and something trillion naira of debt, if you reduce the interest rate by 50 basis points, it reduces the debt service burden, and the country is able to do a lot more with that. Not only the state governments, the federal government, and the central bank for that matter. And you'll see, as we go on to the next slide, you would see immediately, this is what your pocket, your purse, and your price.
This is the effect of what the CBN has come with.
Here it is. In 2020, the rice was 28,000, Gary was 13,500, petrol was 145, and the exchange rate was 440. Look at what happened in 2024. Everything went out of whack. 120,000 for a bag of rice, 38,000 for a bag of Gary, 1,100 for the price of petrol, and the exchange rate went to 1,700. See what happened in 2025. Rice has come down to 80,000, down by 33%. Gary has come down by 20% to 25,000. Petrol has come down from 1,100 to 865, thanks to the Dangote refinery bringing down prices. And the exchange rate has gone from 1,700 to today it closed at 15.15. So it has appreciated by over 11%. So that's great news for the man on the street. But it takes time for him to feel it. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Which brings me to the next question, of course. How do we sustain this?
Yes. First and foremost, there's a history of falling nations due to inflation. Argentina, 1970 to 1990, was a collapsed state and all of chronic high inflation, multiple currency changes. Germany, 1921 to 23, hyperinflation and loss of savings escalated and led to the Second World War. And Zimbabwe, of course, 79, inflation peaked at almost 79% and all of that. So now, again, the world has learned a few lessons. We cannot go down the route of hyperinflation. We need to manage that very well. And if we go on to the next slide, you'll see here, the macroeconomic scorecard is very simple. In Q2 2025 and Q3 2025, there were 5 green and 1 red. GDP growth went from 3.13 to 4.23. That's beautiful. Exchange rate went from 1607 to 1516. Great, green. Inflation came from 22.2 to 20.12, green as well. Brent oil price went from 66 to 67. The only thing that crude oil production went from 1.48 to 1.47, just 1 red. Gross external reserves is now at $43 billion. So this is the scorecard that shows that things are moving in the right direction. And now, what's the fiscal picture is very clear. 1, GDP growth is positive, PMI is expanding, tax reforms and subsidy removal are boosting, and PMI at 54.2. On the monetary side, interest rates in September were actually reduced, and Nigeria
from 27 to
20.12. That's inflation, and the US is 4.25 to 2.9. So if you look at the difference between Nigerian inflation and the US inflation, we are narrowing, and therefore we are not in a bad. So the difference is 22.75 before, and now it's 17.2. So Nigeria is in a good place. Next. Now, what happened? The US Fed cut by 25 bips, and the Bank of Ghana cut by 350 basis points. Inflation in Ghana was as high as 54%. It's now down to 6%. Bank of England staying flat at 4%, and inflation rate at 3.8. South Africa also held. So we are in a good place, generally speaking. Next. So what's going to happen? The ships are waiting berth.
That's between now and perhaps December.
December, yes. Ships are waiting berth will go, as you can see, 2024 is the green, 2025 is the red, and that's increasing sharply. So because people are borrowing, people are importing goods to do the December imports. Next. And oil production, you can see it. You can see the green line there. Rig count, Nigeria is actually increasing, and that is good for Nigeria. And oil production is to be sustained by stable security conditions. Next. Now the PMS price, this is where it becomes interesting. From 1,100, Dangote has been able to bring it down to 865
now.
And now 841. So
now 841.
Yeah. So basically, he has done a lot, fighting with Numpeng and all of that. But basically, at the end of the day, these prices have come down and it's bringing down inflation. And you can see that has declined by 21%. That's what Dangote has done. And you see the refinery is working. Now, 7 items we expect for December to cheer, not to fear. Higher prices, chicken will be up by 22%, tomatoes will be up by 62%, and pepper will be up by 25%. The ones that are going to come down, rice will be down by 17%, Gari will be down by 37%, eggs are going to go down to 5,700, and wheat is down by 10.34. So that's good for everybody. But what are you looking out for in December? We call it Dirty December. Last year, $71 million was brought in by people who came for Dirty December. This year, the expectation is that $143 million, twice the amount. And favorable exchange rate, increase in concerts and events, growth in nightlife, restaurants, and retail sector. You can see, when you go to the next slide, you'll see what happens. Now, we expect Ashake's concert on December 24th. We expect Funke Akindele's movie, Behind the Scenes, on December 25th. We have Shiro Restaurant, that's caught by the Financial Times, and Hard Rock Cafe as well. Flight Time Music Festival is also going to do that. So
all these are going to be bringing that huge amount of 143
absolutely
million.
So, and that's what you have to look out for. So it's a December to cheer, not a December to fear. Next slide. So in the end, oil prices to trade between 65 and 70, which is good. Oil production remain around the 1.5 million barrels. Naira to remain stable, trading between 1,500 and 1,550. Headline inflation will fall to 20%, and stock market will rally by 3%. MPC will ease rates again in November, we believe. So, dirty December.
Dirty December. But, of course, it should be a clean dirty December as well.
Absolutely. More money.
More money into the
spend.
economy. Mr. Bismarck, thank you so much for your thoughts on the News at 10.
Thank you for having me.
Now, still ahead on the News at 10, Central Bank moves to block fresh inflation threats amid soaring government allocations. Well, that will be on Business News. Please join us again. Welcome back to the News at 10, and we now head to the nation's capital, where Terry Ikumi is standing by to give us the latest from our Abuja studios. Over to you, Terry.
Well, many thanks, Ayo. Notable Nigerians from all walks of life have been paying tributes to the former Minister of Agriculture, Chief Ogbeh, as the family commences his funeral processes. Chief Ogbeh died on the 9th of August this year, marking an end to an era many describe as selfless service and dedication to national development.
The night of tribute to former Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Chief Ogbeh, is a solemn and yet celebratory event that brought together Nigeria's political elite and notable figures to honor his remarkable life and contributions to nation building. Chief Ogbeh. Prominent Nigerians, including President Bola Tinubu, who is represented by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, Mr. Peter Obi, and Nasiru El-Rufai are amongst the dignitaries gathered here to pay their respect to the former minister. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation reads President Tinubu's tribute, describing the late chief as a bridge builder who always prioritized Nigeria's interests.
As we reflect on his life and legacies, we're reminded of the importance of leadership, integrity, and service. And we strive to emulate his example and continue his work towards building a better Nigeria. Rest in peace, Senator Ogbeh. Your legacy will never be forgotten.
Melodious hymns from the choir and music from his kingsmen calmed frayed nerves as more glowing tributes from family and friends pour in.
Today, we mourn his passing away. But we should be guided by what he lived for. He lived for the common man. He lived for integrity because I have worked with him. He lived for honesty. And a very, very principled gentleman. Nigeria has lost one of our best. Audu is a precious gem. We are not talking about only integrity. We are not talking about hard work. We are not talking about exemplary leadership, whatever you put him into. Audu was a man of deep values.
a beacon of hope, a mentor, an anchor, a teacher, a guide to our family and many that came his way. To speak of Audu, we take volumes of chapters because his life was lived in depth, not in length. So tonight, let us not only mourn Audu's death, let us also celebrate what he stood for: integrity, humility, compassion, service to others, and our great country, Nigeria.
Late Chief Audu Ogbeh was a man of many parts. Served as Benue State Deputy Speaker in 1979 to 1982, the Minister of Communications from 1982 to 1983, the Minister of Agriculture from 2015 to 2019, and the PDP National Chairman from 2001 to 2005, a period in which he left an indelible mark in the hearts of family and friends.
He was very clear about doing for those who could not do for you. Very clear. He would often say that someone will offer you a cup of water in the desert, and the reason they're doing so, even if you don't know them, is for something you did for someone else a long time ago. He was very clear about his country. He was extremely proud of Nigeria, proud of being Nigerian, proud of being a farmer. His attributes were clear, that we had to be each other's keeper. He was a very devout Catholic, but beyond that, he was a humanist. He believed in the next person and the next person. He was special, and I think maybe it's only when they're gone, perhaps, that light shines even brighter for you. So we're grateful for his life, and we will miss him, and we will honor him certainly.
Without a doubt, late Chief Audu Ogbeh's legacy as a father, statesman, politician and advocate for Nigeria's development is not such that can easily pass away with time.
Now, the National Counter-Terrorism Center, on behalf of the Office of the National Security Advisor, has officially presented 2 kidnapped victims who have been successfully rescued through the non-kinetic strategies in addressing security across the country. Speaking in Abuja shortly before reuniting the victims with their family, the National Coordinator of the National Counter-Terrorism Center, Major General Adamu Laka, says the life of every Nigerian is priceless. The victims, Khadija Shehu Magaji and Fatima Shehu Magaji, were abducted on the 18th of August this year in Makarfi Town, Kaduna State, and taken to Yadi Forest in the Kidanda area of Giwa local government area. While in captivity, Khadija gave birth to a baby girl. Now, the wife of the president, Mrs. Oluremi Tinubu, has said that over 20 billion naira has so far been donated by Nigerians for the construction of the National Library project, abandoned for more than 30 years. She stated this during a lunch with State House correspondents at the banquet hall of the presidential villa, Abuja. Mrs. Tinubu, who marked her 65th birthday on the 21st of September, had encouraged the Nigerians to forego sending personal gifts to her or publishing celebratory messages in newspapers, on television, or on radio. Instead, she called for donations to support the construction of the state-of-the-art National Library. According to her, the project, which has suffered years of abandonment, when completed, will advance the course of knowledge in the country. In responding to criticisms about her intentions, the First Lady said she is driven by a deep sense of duty and patriotism, not political ambition.
The library was started during Shagari. It was maybe muted then, in 1981. And 2006, it was approved by President Obasanjo, and they started building with a budget of 8.2 billion. And in 2010, it was reviewed to about 17 billion. 2023 to 23 billion. But you know what it will be in 2025. So we have 20 billion, 456 million, 188,924 and 93 kobo. And it's still growing. Trust me. It is still growing. This is what we can do as a nation. I will would like to clear the air about some speculations that maybe this has a political undertone. What is wrong in doing well or trying to build a society? If I could assist the post-war building process in Liberia by donating the Oluremi Tinubu Elementary and Junior Secondary School in Montserrado County in Liberia, what is wrong in drawing attention to some of the areas of need in our beloved nation?
Well, that's it from the nation's capital. Over now to Willie Bong in Lagos for business news.
Thank you, Terry. The central bank governor, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso, has explained that the bank is taking precautionary measures that will forestall any form of inflationary pressures owing to excess liquidity in the system. The governor was speaking at the briefing of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting in Abuja. He notes that while allocations to the federal, state and local governments have risen sharply in recent months, the central bank will continue to monitor developments and build on the gains already achieved to sustain monetary and fiscal stability. Meanwhile, the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise has welcomed the central bank's latest move to ease credit conditions. As its meeting today, the CPN MPC cut the benchmark interest rate to 27%, reduced banks' reserve ratio to 45%, and tightened rules on public sector deposits. With inflation easing for 5 straight months, CPP says the move is timely, as the measures will lower borrowing costs, expand lending, and boost investment, especially for small businesses. The group adds that the policy marks a shift from stability to growth. It, however, stressed that fiscal measures must complement the policy. The government, it said, must sustain discipline, invest in infrastructure, improve security, and create a friendlier business environment to unlock the full benefits. Move on to manufacturers in the country who are warning against the possible introduction of a tax stamp system for excisable products. The group says while government's 2025 Tax Act simplified and harmonized levies, tax stamps would amount to a hidden tax that would raise costs for industries, especially small businesses. The man argues that tax stamps often bring high compliance costs, bottlenecks, and little revenue. It warns that extra costs may hit consumers, fuel illicit trade, weaken local manufacturers under AFCFTA, and threaten jobs and investments. Now, the group urged government to use existing digital tools like e-invoicing and customs excise registers, and to prioritize border enforcement and stakeholder input over new burdens. Now we check in with the domestic equities market, which sustained negative sentiment for a second day this week as the central bank cut interest rates for the first time in 5 years. John Mekwa tells us more.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the stock market reports. Well, while the real sector is awaiting the positive impact that should be coming from the 50 basis points cut on the MPR, which the CBN MPC delivered earlier today, it does seem that investment sentiment hasn't yet changed at the NGX, because today market mover Dangote Sugar, which opened at 60 naira, lost 6 naira to close at 54 naira. So it's still profit-taking. That's the sentiment with investors. Also, profit-taking has spread to the banking sector, as banking today lost more than 1% because of Accessco, First Holdco, and GTCO. Even we saw some results coming from GTCO earlier today, but I guess that came in too late to influence investment or investor sentiments today. We'll see that tomorrow. So banking is down. Consumer goods, largely driven by Dangote Sugar and Nigerian breweries, they are also in the red, as well as oil and gas, almost 2% down. Aradel lost 28 naira today. So that has driven this oil and gas down. At the close of trade, the oil share is in the red today, 0.4%, sustaining the 141,000 level. It's been holding, I think, since Friday and all, and then about 300 billion lost from the market cap, and leaves us at 89.198 trillion naira at the close of trade. So it's a victory to the bear.
And that's business news. It's back to Ayotunde for the rest of the news at 10.
Thank you, Will. Over now to our London studio, where Simon Pusey is standing by to give us the latest in Around the World in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel's studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5.
You have the right to control your borders.
Donald Trump has told the UN General Assembly it's time to end the failed experiment of open borders, as he accused the UN of facilitating an invasion of Western countries. The US president also brought up his claims about ending 7 wars since his return to the White House. He reiterated that recognizing a Palestinian state would be a reward for the terrible atrocities Hamas had committed, as he told the group to release the hostages now.
I didn't think of it at the time because I was too busy working to save millions of lives. That is the saving and stopping of these wars. But later I realized that the United Nations wasn't there for us. They weren't there. I thought of it really after the fact, not during these negotiations, which were not easy. That being the case, what is the purpose of the United Nations? The UN has such tremendous potential.
Meanwhile, doctors in the United States will soon be advised not to prescribe the pain reliever Tylenol to pregnant women. That's according to Donald Trump, citing a disputed link between the drug and autism. Mr. Trump made the announcement in the Oval Office alongside Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Don't take Tylenol.
The president claimed that taking paracetamol, the main ingredient in Tylenol, is no good and that pregnant women should only take it in cases of extreme fever. However, many doctors are skeptical between the link.
The best evidence we have does not show that Tylenol causes autism. They cherry-picked a couple studies that they thought backed their claims. They ignored the lion's share of studies that argue against Tylenol causing autism. The best recent study argues against a causal link.
I would say that's probably what we've been telling people all along. No one takes Tylenol unless it's necessary. It's not like a vitamin, and we would never treat it that way. Patients are told to use acetaminophen when they have a fever, when they have a headache, or other pain symptoms in pregnancy which require treatment. So I was hoping maybe we'd hear something a little bit more detailed, and maybe that's still to come, but I'm not surprised by that statement.
Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has been charged with crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. The 80-year-old is accused of being criminally responsible for dozens of murders that allegedly took place as part of his so-called war on drugs, during which thousands of small-time drug dealers, users and others were killed without trial. The ICC's charge sheet, which includes several redactions, dates from July, but was only made public on Monday. China has evacuated hundreds of thousands of people and ordered at least 10 cities to close schools and some businesses as the strongest storm of the year bears down on its southern coast. Super Typhoon Regasa has already torn through the Philippines and Taiwan. One of the world's busiest cities, Hong Kong, is at a standstill with shelters open. More than 700 flights across the region have been diverted or cancelled. The storm is expected to make landfall in China's Guangdong province on Wednesday, where some 370,000 people have been evacuated so far, as authorities warn of a catastrophic situation. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger have announced they will immediately withdraw from the International Criminal Court, labelling it an instrument of neo-colonialist repression. The 3 military-led countries issued a joint statement saying they would not recognise the authority of the UN-backed court based in The Hague. The court has not yet responded to the decision by the 3 countries, all of which have close ties to Russia, whose leader, Vladimir Putin, has been subject to an ICC arrest warrant.
The MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them.
Jimmy Kimmel's late-night talk show will resume airing on Tuesday, according to Disney. The show was suspended after comments Kimmel made about the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. In a statement, Disney said, "We have spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." Earlier on Monday, hundreds of celebrities, including Jennifer Aniston, Meryl Streep and Robert De Niro, signed a letter backing Mr. Kimmel. And a wandering elk, spotted at dozens of locations across Central Europe this summer, has been captured by authorities in Austria and released close to the Czech border. The elk, nicknamed Emil, was tranquilized by Austrian wildlife officials on Monday after straying dangerously close to a motorway in Upper Austria. He was fitted with a GPS tag and released on the Czech-Austrian border, on the edge of the Sumava forest of South Bohemia.
And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel's studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to Sports News. The Nigeria Football Federation has congratulated Super Falcons and Brighton Safe and Chiamaka Nnadozie on our 4th place finish at this year's Ballon d'Or ceremony in Paris. The NFF says a Nigerian finishing as the 4th best goalkeeper in the world is a commendable feat given the caliber of goalkeepers she was up against. Super Falcons head coach Justin Madugu also finished 4th in the Women's Coach of the Year category in a race won by England's women's head coach Sarina Wiegman. Then Arsenal manager Mikel Arteta says Noni Madueke is likely to be sidelined for a few weeks despite reports the winger faces 2 months out with a knee injury. The England winger came off at half-time of the 1-1 draw with Manchester City and was replaced by Bukayo Saka, who had only returned from his own hamstring injury. Madueke's setback means Arsenal have picked up at least 1 injury in every league game so far this season. And Kenya's winning athlete received a raucous welcome home earlier today after finishing 2nd in the overall medal table at the World Championships in Tokyo with a haul of 7 gold. The team from the East African country took 11 medals in total. In addition to the golds, they won 2 silver and 2 bronze. Draped in tinsel traditional wreath on their forehead, the athletes were carried through a chaotic crowd of fans, officials and their families after emerging from Nairobi's main airport. That sport is back to you, Ayo.
And the main news again. The Vice President Kashim Shettima joined global leaders in New York for the commemorative 80th United Nations General Assembly session, highlighting Nigeria's diplomatic presence. And also today, the National Assembly reopened the sealed office of Kogi Central Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, restoring access after closure dispute sparked political controversy. That's the news at 10 tonight. Many thanks for watching. I'm Ayo Tunde Balogun, and you have a good night.